Mic check, mic check. All right. Here we go. Let me turn this up just a little bit. Oh, we are in week 12. Welcome. Let me get my camera all set up here. So here we are, ladies and gentlemen, week 12 of the semester, 3/4 of the way through. Is that right? Yeah, 3/4 of the way through. 12 weeks of our 16-week semester. Next week, our exam for chapters 9, 10, and 11 are due. So, again, we talk about chapters 9, 10, and 11, and I've classically kind of called them the joints, movements, and muscles section. So, primarily, we'll be looking at the classification of joints. Let me hop into it here, where we'll be looking at the different components. So we have the joints or articulations. The definition of a joint or an articulation is where two bones meet. And so we have two classifications of those joints. We have the structural classification. The structural classification asks the question, what holds these two bones together? So in the fibrous joints, there's a dense fibrous connective tissue, a ligament. In the cartilaginous joints, it's either held together by fibrocartilage or hyaline cartilage. And then synovial joints there's actually a space in between those bones. It's synovial fluid sitting in between there. And so there's a space in the ligaments on either side. And so, oh, sorry, just clicking on a couple things here. And so, and then the functional classification of joints refers to how much movement is available. So synarthroses refers to the no available motion, so synarthroses, and primarily, we could start to annotate this a little bit, primarily what we tend to see, with very few exceptions, is that, let's go highlighter here, fibrous joints are primarily synarthroses. Right, fibrous joints are primarily synarthroses. Two examples of those synarthrotic fibrous joints are your gymphosis, your sutures of the skull. Cartilaginous joints tend to be amphiarthrotic. So fibrocartilage is a symphysis, and that is a amphiarthrotic type of joint. The fibrous joint, there is a type of fibrous joint that tends to be a little amphiarthrosis, and it's a syndesmosis. So where we have those two bones that are held, two parallel bones held together by a syndesmosis, a ligament holding them together. That ligament's often referred to as the interosseous membrane. One of them is referred to as the interosseous membrane, and then there's a ligament at the proximal or distal end too that's holding it together. But for the most part, a syndesmosis is a fibrous joint that is classified as an amphiarthrosis. And then the last one here is the, let's go blue, is synovial. And all, without exception here, all synovial joints are diarthroses. Right? So all synovial joints are diarthroses. And then finally, the big section here on chapter 9, or a big portion that you'll see in the practical, is going to be body movements. In chapter 10, there's a couple of big sections here that we talk about. The first is going to be the different types of muscle tissue. So you can have skeletal muscle tissue, cardiac muscle tissue, and smooth muscle tissue. You might want to kind of just break down some of the histological characteristics of each of those tissues. So remember that skeletal muscle tissue's got a long cylindrical shape. It has multiple nuclei, and it has these dark and light alternating bands called striations. And then finally, skeletal muscle is voluntary, meaning that it requires volitional thought for it to contract, right? Cardiac muscle has more of a short branched fibers. There's usually one nuclei per cell in the cardiac muscle tissue. There are cardiac muscle tissue is involuntary, considering the fact that you do not have to actually think for your heart to beat. And then finally, cardiac muscle tissue contains intercalated discs. It also has striations, dark and light alternating bands. It also has striations as well, which are the dark and light alternating bands, but also intercalated discs, which are the junctions, gap junctions, as well as tight junctions that allow for the cardiac muscle cells to be adhered together, but also communication to flow between the two cells. When we talk about the characteristics of skeletal muscle, I'm talking about things like contractility, or let's start with from the top here. Irritability, or irritability is the ability to respond to a stimuli. The contractility is the ability to create force. The muscle contracts and creates force. Muscles also demonstrate a couple of things. They demonstrate elasticity, extensibility, and elasticity. Extensibility is its ability to stretch, so you can stretch a muscle, but elasticity is ability to return back to its normal resting length. The microscopic and gross anatomy of the muscle, all the way from the muscle itself as an organ, right? So like your biceps, your triceps, those are all organs. And then the organ system is the muscular system. So you've got the organ, which is made up of a bunch of muscle fibers, which are known as groups of muscle fibers, which are known as fascicles. Again, each of those fascicles contains a number of different muscle fibers. Within the muscle fiber, it's made up of the myofibril, and then from the myofibril, it's made up of myofilaments, right? So the myofilaments, from biggest to smallest, being able to identify the structure of skeletal muscle. And then finally, for Chapter 10, a big component that you want to be familiar with is the steps of a muscle contraction. So you have excitation, contraction, coupling, and then cross-bridge cycling. These are the three components of the muscle contraction that you should be familiar with. You've seen the video. I've published the videos on the Canvas. I encourage you guys to take a look at that, and that is a big component of the multiple choice. So a lot of these Chapter 10 is going to be heavily weighted towards the multiple choice. You'll probably see more questions from Chapter 10 than you will of any of the others in the multiple choice section. So you'll have a good, at least half to a little more than half of the questions for Chapter 10. A little bit more than half of the questions from your multiple choice will be associated with Chapter 10. And then, let's go back. Let's go this way. There it is. And then Chapter 11, the muscular system. So being able to identify muscles. If I give you a picture of a muscle, could you give me the name of it? Could you give me the origin? So if I gave you a picture of that muscle, could you tell me what the origin is, right? Or the action, the origin, the insertion, or the action. So usually I refer to the origin as more of the proximal attachment point. It's attached to the less movable bone. The insertion is the distal attachment point. It's attached to the more movable bone. And then ultimately the action. So being able to identify the origin, the insertion, and the action of each of those muscles is going to be important. And so let me give you a lowdown on some help here as to what you might have, so that can what you have in your canvas, so that it can be helpful for you guys here. So again, here, if you take a look at your canvas, what you'll see is that we've got body movements. Body movements is a PDF that has all of the body movements that you'll see in the practical. So the body movements are demonstrated here. You can see like mandibular elevation, mandibular depression, protraction, retraction of the mandible, head or neck extension or head and neck hyperextension, head or neck flexion. These are all associated movements, and then there's 51 of them, but all of these will be added into your practical. So knowing the muscle movements is a big one. Go back to modules. Right, we did chapters 9, 10, so we looked at body movement. In chapter 10, you'll see that there's videos here associated with the skeletal muscle contraction, so being familiar with the skeletal muscle contraction, starting with excitation. Basically, how does a nerve stimulate a muscle? And so you can see here that there's a number of different steps that occur that require to occur sequentially in order for a muscle to go through the steps of a contraction here. So again, that's right there under modules, chapter 10, excuse me, chapter 10, yeah. Excitation, contraction, coupling, and cross bridge cycling are the big ones there. And then finally, when we get to chapter 11, remember that your master muscle list. So all the muscles that that are fair game that I will ask you about are located right here on the master muscle list. You can see that list. And then the question is, okay, what is it that you want us to know about these muscles? Well, again, as I've mentioned, you need to be familiar with the. Actually, let me show you where I got that from. You need to be familiar with the origins, the insertions, and the actions. So if you click on the muscle flashcards here, what you'll see is that it provides, let me throw it up there now that I've clicked on it. Let me try this one more time. Okay, there it is. What you see is that it provides you with the muscles. There's a picture, so you should be able to identify this muscle via a picture. There is the origin, the insertion, and the action. You won't have to know the innervation. That's just some added material there for your own edification, but you should be able to identify, again, the origin, the insertion, and the action of each of these muscles. And that's really got the time I got for today, guys. That's all I got for you. Really just a overview of the 3 chapters that you're going to see here in exam number 5. Only one more exam after this, a couple more labs. We are in the last quarter, the last 25%. You are 75% of the way done here, especially after this exam. Hopefully it is satisfying to see how much work that you guys have done. I again encourage you guys to continue working hard. I am definitely proud of the effort that you've put in here, and feel free to hit me up with any comments, questions, or concerns via email or any other way that you can get a hold of me. But until then, guys, thank you and take care.